Rachel is Karma's most abused and traumatized character. Karma the Dark World is a psychological horror game with an intense, puzzling story. It has themes of 1984 with its dystopian and oppressive elements where Mother is Big Brother, an entity, an idea that is always watching, and at the center of this alternate reality of East Germany in 1984 is the Leviathan Corporation, who controls and owns everything and everyone. There's also this alien-like supernatural substance called Dasein, which can bend reality and even life and death. Leviathan has night crawlers or roam agents, basically observers, who can dive into people's minds and see their memories. I have a full story explained video where I tell the entire story and give the full breakdown of the game. However, I have it also explained in chronological order. But be warned, it's like if George Orwell wrote a book inspired by Inception and Interstellar. I mean, there's layers and multifaceted dimensions to this experience, so I will link that down below for you if you want to see that first in order to avoid spoilers in this video. But, off rip, Rachel was a very compelling character from the moment we step into the room with her, and once we dive into her memories, we see that she has suffered so much. And I want to analyze her character and her story because it is so fucked up. But she ends up prevailing through her ability to persevere and to resist the world who tried to condemn her. That was her. She did all that. In the end, she helps to give the world the karma that they deserved. Trigger warning here because, again, her story is beyond sick. Mature content ahead. If you enjoyed your time here, like the video. If you didn't like the video, there's something called free will, and you can leave the video right now, but don't forget to hit the dislike button because all engagement is engagement. And welcome to the psychology of
Rachel in Karma, the Dark World.
Before she was ever a scientist, before Leviathan, before Dasein, she was a prisoner in her own home, if you could call it a home. She grew up under parents who didn't see her as a daughter. They didn't nurture her or celebrate her brilliance. They feared it, controlled it, and eventually they sold it. Not metaphorically, literally. Because her body became their source of income. They would intercept every letter from Leviathan, every job offer that could have gotten her out of the situation. And while those opportunities piled up in a cabinet somewhere, they paraded her in front of men. They told her to take some pills, to get over it, to stop crying. Told her it was already done, that it would be fast.
What are you crying for? It's already done.
It was as easy as I said it would be.
For Rachel, this was a long, suffocating sentence. No escape, no identity, just survival. And this wasn't just trauma, it was conditioning. When somebody is raised in an environment where pain and exploitation are routine, the brain starts to adapt to that. Psychologist Judith Herman actually hits on this. And today we can now recognize this as complex PTSD, or CPTSD. And so the difference between CPTSD and PTSD is that while PTSD is a condition somebody can get from a single traumatic event like seeing combat or watching somebody die, with CPTSD, it is repeated abuse over time, often by people you're supposed to trust. And so when we're able to look at it through these lenses, we see that the result isn't just fear or anxiety, it is a fractured sense of self. You don't know where your boundaries are because they've always been violated. You don't know what love is because it's always been weaponized. For Rachel, it created a deep psychological wound that never truly closed. But what makes her story harder to stomach is how normalized that her suffering became to everyone around her. The people who catcalled her, the ones who whispered about her, even the neighbors who probably saw what was going on and said nothing.
She dresses like this every night. You know what she does,
I heard
right?
her family just brought a new TV. She must be raking in the dough.
Hey, sexy. How much you charge?
I saw our department chief following her mum down there.
And for me, that is the part that sticks out the most. people saw, people knew, or even had a suspicion that something was going on with her, and they chose not to do anything. This wasn't just a horror story that unfolded in isolation, it happened in plain sight. And that is what makes this feel real. Yet despite all of this, Rachel did not break. In 1970, presumably 5 years since she first applied, 5 years of Leviathan recognizing how smart she was, but also 5 years of her parents forcing their daughter into prostitution, Rachel finally got the acceptance letter. Keep in mind, everything that we see here in this section of the game is about 3 layers deep into a memory, so time does work differently here, but based off a calendar in the memory of her kitchen and the date of her letter of employment offer, that is how I got 5 years. But she gets the letter because she found a way to have Leviathan send it to her apartment instead of the house. By the way, this wasn't an apartment that she owned or got for herself, it was an apartment that her parents got for her so that she could be closer to the city and more accessible to service men. But a job working as a scientist was her way to get out. She read the letter, and she had a split second to make a decision. Almost through instinct, her body carried her. She burned that place to the ground, and she ran.
Those desks are all on its desk. You better look your best, do you hear?
Fuck this family.
And running away from an abuser is an extremely scary situation to be in. I don't know if any of you guys have ever run away from somebody that you wanted to escape from, but that feeling of running away and you're out of breath and you keep looking behind you because you're scared that they're gonna find you or catch you, that is a terrifying feeling to have. But now I want to talk about when she finally discovered the truth, that Leviathan had been trying to reach her since 1965 and her parents kept it all from her. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a rupture in reality. For her, having to pleasure multitudes of men because her mother and father forced her to, but then learning that she could have gotten out a long time ago was tremendously shattering internally. And again, like I haven't seen something this absolutely horrid, abhorrent in such a long time. It is so messed up. What makes my stomach twist and turn even more is knowing that somewhere around the world, this is some poor kid's reality. And that truly sucks, because parents are supposed to nurture and take care of and protect their children, but in reality there are some sick and demented parents out there. However, in that moment, in 1970, when she burned the apartment down and ran away, this wasn't just a physical escape for her. It was the beginning of her reclaiming who she was. The start of her identity formation, which Erik Erikson calls a key task in adolescence and early adulthood. And so, for most people, this process happens gradually. For Rachel, it happened in fire, where she rose like a phoenix from the ashes of captivity. When Rachel arrived at Leviathan, she didn't come as a blank slate, she came with scars, but she also came with something rare, an ironclad will that refused to break. And there are so many things that should have broken her, that could have broken anybody, but not her. And even in a corporate system designed to strip people down and mold them into obedient pieces of a machine, she kept her core intact. She noticed how the Institute drained the individuality out of its employees, how people turned robotic, concerned only with productivity and protocol. But Rachel was built different. And for a while, she played along. She did the work, she studied Dasein under Brian McGovern, another huge main character in the story. She kept her head down, but inside, she stayed human. This resistance is something psychologists like Carl Rogers talks about. He believed that at our core, every person has this innate drive towards actualization, a kind of quiet, persistent push internally to become who we truly are, even in the face of oppression. And Rachel had that. Despite everything, she still wanted to contribute to something meaningful. But at the foundational level, because her parents never gave it to her, Rachel still wanted love. To be love. To give love. And then she would meet Lucas. Let me tell you, this wasn't just a romantic subplot. For her, it was a psychological breakthrough. Especially for Rachel, where she had become accustomed to being violated by men, exploited by her parents, and expected to be a cog in a corporate wheel, her finding Lucas was huge. Like, me, the player, I wanted this. I was rooting so hard for them, despite knowing in a world like this, nothing lasts forever. But this was still a better love story than Twilight. Lucas was kind, gentle. He didn't ask anything from her. He didn't have any hidden agenda or angle with her. He was just pure golden retriever energy. And that is how my wife describes me. I love my wife. But here's something else. Rachel, already having walls up, would be terrified to tell Lucas about the life that she suffered through. She was terrified that he might not want her anymore if he learned that she had been forced to be with so many men. In her eyes, she was damaged goods. And she was scared that Lucas wouldn't want her because of that. But Lucas didn't flinch when she told him the truth. After a lifetime of being used, Rachel found somebody who saw her as a person, not a product. And their love became her anchor, her moment of transcendence. That is what real love does. It makes you better. It takes you higher than you ever thought could be possible. For Rachel, this wasn't just about healing, because nothing could heal her. It was about showing that she wasn't broken beyond repair and learning to accept that she could still feel something pure, love, real love, for the first time in her life. It wasn't just about the way that he looked at her. It was the way that he didn't feel disgust at her past, that he saw her for who she really was. It was the way that he stayed, the way that he held her like she was whole, even when she didn't believe it herself. That kind of love, it doesn't just stick with you, it rebuilds you. And here's the thing about trauma that I don't think is talked about enough. Trauma disconnects you. It disconnects you from others, it disconnects you from yourself. But that connection, that genuine, vulnerable kind, is what starts to reverse the damage. This is why this is so necessary. What Lucas gave her wasn't just affection, it was a reminder that she still had worth. She still had a soul worth saving. For a while, they imagined something better. A life outside the city, a family. And there's a scene where two ribbons twist and intertwine with one another, and it looks like a DNA strand. Then we see sperm whales flying up into what looks like an egg. Later we see pink balloons. I think Rachel got pregnant with Lucas, and I believe it was a girl. But in stories such as this one, peace and love don't last. Not when the world's this cruel and only conducive to an environment where suffering is the norm. Lucas wanted to meet her parents, to get their blessing before they got married, to do the right thing. Rachel warned him, begged him not to, but Lucas still believed in people. He thought love could soften even the worst of them.
You think you can kill my precious daughter without pain? She's mine. Die.
Rachel's father shot him in the head. That was it. The one bright thing in her life, gone. This kind of loss is what psychologists refer to as a catastrophic grief event. Not just because somebody died, but because of how they died and what they represented. Because Lucas wasn't just a partner. He was Rachel's proof, only proof, that life could still have meaning. The only starlight in a sky filled with a black void, and when he was taken from her, it confirmed Rachel's worst fear, that the world never intended to let her be free. That moment snapped something inside of her. All the abuse, all the silence she endured, it all turned inward. But again, instead of breaking, she hardened. She didn't only blame her parents, she began to blame Leviathan. The war that won the corporation their hold over the country destroyed her father, and Leviathan discarded him, refusing to give him veteran benefits. The chain of events that led to every single trauma in her life, she believes, started there, and she knew it. But, let me be clear, Poverty doesn't give anyone a damn excuse to abuse others, especially their own children. The fact that her parents chose to be vile and cruel to their baby girl speaks volumes about the monsters that they already were. As a father, as a man, you should be willing to do anything to make money and provide for your family. Parents should not rely on their children to take care of them. It is not the child's responsibility to take care of you. You should have set yourself up so that you wouldn't have to be a burden to your kid. Now, I'm not trying to disregard any cultures or anybody who wants to help and take care of their parents. That is your own prerogative, and I respect it, and that is a great thing to be able to do. I am specifically only talking about parents who have kids in the hopes that they're going to succeed in life and end up taking care of them. But all of this with Rachel, the death of her only loved one, misery wouldn't let her be. People who experience this kind of grief often turn towards obsession. Because when someone dies unjustly, the mind can't let it go. It loops, it fixates. That is when Rachel began trying to bring Lucas back, using her position and brilliance as a scientist. Over and over again, she used Dasein to resurrect what she'd lost. But Dasein doesn't give. Exactly. It's like this twisted genie. Every version of Lucas that came back more monstrous than the last. Hungry, violent, wrong. Again, I dive into more details in my Story Explained video, but the TLDW version is that he begins eating dead human bodies. So he begins to regenerate from his wounds, but he starts growing more limbs and his appetite grows more voraciously day by day. But for Rachel, she knows that Lucas's consciousness is still alive in there. Every time she connects, she can feel him in there. This is where Freud's concept of repetition compulsion takes root. He believed that people who suffer trauma often find themselves unconsciously recreating that trauma, not because they enjoy it, but because deep down they are trying to master it, to take control of that trauma, of something that once made them powerless. It isn't about healing, because oftentimes people feel like they are beyond healing, so for them it's about rewriting the ending, trying again and again until maybe the story ends differently. And that is exactly what Rachel was doing. Every time she tried to bring Lucas back, every time she poured more of herself into that Dasein-soaked abomination, it wasn't just desperation, it was repetition. She kept reenacting the moment of his death, trying to undo it, trying to bring him back just right this time. But the truth is, trauma doesn't play fair. It warps everything it touches, including the people you love. Even as Lucas's body twisted into something unrecognizable, even as his hunger grew and his humanity vanished, Rachel stayed. Because what else could she do? When the pain becomes your only tether to that person, letting go starts to feel like dying twice. Something that I can think about, that I think we can all relate to, but it's still to a very small degree, is the first time that we fell in love and the first time that we felt heartbreak. What that felt like to desperately try to hold on to that person and beg them to come back even though they didn't want us anymore. This is what I'm talking about. The pain that we go through with the heartbreak becomes the only tether. We would rather feel the pain to still feel connected to them in that way instead of letting them go and feeling the pain of dying again. By the way, there's nothing that a beer can't fix, so I'm kidding. Don't turn to alcohol if you're going through a heartbreak or anything traumatic. I'm kidding. Sorry. Jokes aside, this is such a serious video, I'm sorry. But jokes aside, Rachel held on. She protected Lucas, kept him hidden as she continued to conduct more research to resurrect him, because even in that grotesque, half-human form, he was still the only piece of her that ever felt real. But Dasein operates in a weird way. It takes what's inside of you and amplifies it. It amplifies obsession, corrupts attachment, and by 1976, Rachel's body had already begun breaking down beyond repair. And that is part of why I think we only ever see Rachel covered all the way up, even wearing yellow gloves. But the other reason I think she's always covered up, and you can tell me what you guys think, is because of her past where men would look at her and objectify her and catcall her. That made her want to just cover up all the time. But according to my wife, disgusting men will still look and objectify you no matter what a woman wears, so there's that. But Rachel's time was running out, and she knew it. All the trials and times she connected to Lucas and controlled his body were catching up with her. So she makes a final request, to die with Lucas. Not the monster, not the corpse, but the Lucas that she remembered, the man who once saw her for who she was, the only one who ever did. She asks Brian and Fred for help, not to extend her life, but to end it in a way that felt meaningful. She wanted what little was left of Lucas's consciousness to be transferred into her own, to merge minds, to share that last breath with him, even if only inside of her head. And so, from a psychological lens, this is what Carl Jung might call a merging of the Anima and Animus, the internalized feminine and masculine halves of the self. Except here, it isn't symbolic, it is literal. Rachel wasn't trying to achieve balance, she was trying to dissolve, to meld, to vanish into the only person who ever made her feel whole. This wasn't about identity anymore. It was about annihilation, but on her terms. If she was going to disappear, if she was going to leave this universe, she was going to do it with Lucas. For Rachel, this symbolizes her taking control of her life and at the same time dishing out karma to Leviathan and her parents. And Brian, seeing her pain and knowing her usefulness, agrees. But there's a catch. One final condition. Help him destroy Leviathan. And Rachel, who had already lost everything, who had already been hollowed out by grief and obsession, says yes, ready to do anything to die with Lucas. If dying with him meant destroying Leviathan, well, so be it. She already lost everything. This is all she had left. And that is how Rachel gets tangled up in everything. And what I really like about this is whether or not she planned for this, her memories were seen. Her truth wouldn't vanish like so many others. Inside her mind, Daniel finds her story. Not just the plan, not just Brian, but her real self. He sees what she survived, what she sacrificed, what she lost trying to hold on. She wins. Not with a fire, not with revenge, but with memory, with love. And the paradox of Rachel's story is that she didn't just survive her parents or Leviathan by fighting it directly, she survived by being remembered by the very agent that they thought they owned, but also by denying her parents and ending up with Lucas anyway. YouTube thinks you're gonna like this video next, so click the video on screen.